This is gonna suck.
It's going to suck for me editing. I wish I had done it 3 weeks ago now so I would have time to edit it.
You're listening to 515, the Ultraman podcast, the show that invites you into the lives of people who make up the Ultra family. Here's your host for these conversations, Larry Ryan.
Thanks, Mary Jo. Today I have just one Ohana member guest, the person who is responsible for me doing this podcast right now. If I had not known this athlete, I would never have been introduced to this ultra world. So many thanks to you. Let's hear how this all came about. My guest today is someone that many listeners will be familiar with. In fact, I've known this person for half of my life. She has completed a number of ultramarathons, including 4 100-kilometer races, a 100-miler, and 2 135-milers, which for most of the world, that equals 217 kilometers. She has competed in 15 long-distance tries, including finishing on back-to-back weekends on opposite sides of North America. She has competed in 5 5:15 distance events, which she also attempted to do on back-to-back weekends in 2019. Joining me from her home in Vancouver, British Columbia, Lucy Ryan.
Hey, Larry.
Now, for those
Wait,
listeners...
stop. That wasn't good.
Okay, go.
Can you edit that out?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. Lucy Ryan. And then what do I don't know.
Just say hello.
Hello.
All right. People will recognize that cackle anywhere that know Lucy. For those listeners who do not know us personally, yes, we share the same last name because we were married to each other at one time, and now we are still good friends. And for me, this is going to be a difficult interview to do because I think I know all of the answers already because I was at most of these events with you that you're going to talk about, and I might even know some of the answers better than you. So... the thing about this is I couldn't take it anymore. How many times you were asking me, when is it going to be my turn to be on the podcast any longer? So here we are, me and Lucy on the podcast. So let's get into this a little bit. So all this ultra stuff started for you back in 2005. Previous to that, you had always been a runner, but not having done more than a half marathon, if I remember correctly.
That's right.
And then in 2005, back when we were married, you, me, and our son Grayson, we all went to Perth, Australia on a teacher exchange. And that was the thing that changed your life. So tell our listeners, what happened to you while we were spending the year in Oz?
It most certainly changed my life. That's where I started doing triathlon. I joined an all-women's group and, to meet people as well. And from there, I started doing a couple of short tries in Australia. And I volunteered for Ironman Western Australia, which is in the quaint little town of Busselton. And I started out the day thinking, these people are crazy. Who would want to do this stuff? This is just nuts. And then by the end of the day, I was at the finish line. We were all at the finish line. And I don't know if you noticed, but I had tears in my eyes when I saw those people finish, and I didn't even know them. And I thought, I'm going to do this one day. And so that's where it all started.
Do you remember the name of that group that you joined, that women's group? Does it still exist as far as you know? Or
yes.
Have you ever checked in on it?
Yes. I'm on their Facebook page. It's WAT, Women's Academy of Triathlon.
And do you remember the first pool swim that you went to with them?
I couldn't even swim 50 meters across the pool. I had to get out. And I was like freaking right out. And the coach looked at me like, really? And I was so embarrassed that I didn't want to go back. But I pushed myself to go back.
Yeah. And of course, being in Australia where everybody swims, that made it that much tougher, right?
Totally.
You've been working with this tri group for a little bit, and you're ready to do your first race. It has an ocean swim in it, and it was a pretty rough day that day with some really big swells. What was your first triathlon like for you?
It was horrible. I was just terrified. Honestly, I was just terrified. I've never swam in the ocean before, and this is my very first open water swim in my whole life. And I remember panicking. I was hanging on for dear life. I was absolutely terrified, and I had to grab onto the paddler. And I remember announcing to that person, "I'm drinking water." And the person looked at me like, okay.
All right. So your first triathlon was a bit of an ordeal, but you were in it to stick with it. During that time, you also did your first marathon. You signed up for your first marathon, also down in Busselton, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was close to Busselton. I think it was called Albany. Yes. Yeah, I signed up for my first full marathon. And then I saw another thing another field I could tick off, and it was for 50K. And I thought, well, why not do 8 more kilometers and just round it off to a nice even 50 instead of the 42. So that's exactly what I did. My first marathon was an ultra marathon.
So you kind of work your way through triathlon the way most people do, with doing some short stuff and I think a half, and then you did Ironman Canada. Is that the procedure that you followed?
Yes. We came back to Canada. I was super depressed, and I thought, I have to do something to take my mind off of being back in Canada. So I signed up. I met some strange guy on the street and gave him a check for $500. And that was back when you could sign up another person. You had to sign up in person in the lineup the next day. And so that's how that came about. I had no idea who this guy was. And he said, well, do you want to see my ID? And I said, no, that's okay.
So you're working your way through Ironman, and you actually have had the opportunity as well to go to Kona for the World Championship. Can you tell us about how that came about?
Well, I entered the lottery. I think it was the third time I entered the lottery, and the results were up, and I was going through the list. My name hadn't come up, not yet. And then towards the bottom of the list, I saw my name, and I just could not believe it. I was happier winning that lottery than like $1 million lottery. And then I called you at work for probably only the second time to tell you I got in.
And you actually, when you went to Kona, you had the full experience. Everything was good. It wasn't like you were out of place there. Do you remember what your placing was at Kona?
I have no idea. Bottom quarter. It didn't matter. It was all for the great experience of it. I was very happy to be there, privileged.
And then, of course, this Ironman thing got to be a bit of a bore for you, and you found out, like most people, that there's something bigger than Ironman, and you went on to Ultraman. And then, so in 2010, you successfully finished your first Ultraman Canada. 2011, you and I were crew for Juan Craveri. I interviewed Juan back in season 1 and episode 5 for people that want to go back and listen to hear about Juan. And then in 2012, you and I went back to crew again, and that was for Brad Sawa. And that was how we met Brad and how that all got started. His episode is episode 10 in season 1. And then in 2013, you went back to race for your second time at Ultraman Canada. And I was interviewing Chad Bentley in the first episode. And he told a story about that race that I'm going to play for you now so that you can comment on this.
Okay.
I got the opportunity to come and crew with you and witness firsthand what that race had to offer. And I remember how blown away I was watching Lucy.
Yeah. And then
like when we had to cover her up on the run course because she was going into shock or something. She had to have a nap. So you covered her up and she slept for, I don't know how long. I don't know if it was 20 minutes. And then she got up and just started running. I was like, this is one tough woman.
Yeah, that's one of those times where Lucy was down and people would think that she was out, but not quite.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I ended up cutting that one out of Chad's interview. I thought it made more sense to do it with you. When we met Chad, or when you met Chad, that was back when you were part of the Tri-Cities club here in the
Right.
Coquitlam area.
Mhm.
He talked about that and the people that he met there. That's one of the few times where you had a coach working with you, because you like to, as you say, do it by feel.
That's right. And as you say, I'm uncoachable. It's okay.
Tell me a little bit about how that race went for you, and how did it end up that you were on the ground under the blanket taking a nap, as Chad says?
God.
Was that part of the lack of planning or coaching? What happened in that race?
Well, if you recall, I was taking the place of Ann Barnes. She was supposed to be doing the race that year. And she pulled out, I don't know, maybe was it 5 or 6 weeks prior to the race. And I said to Steve Brown, the race director at the time, can I take Ann's spot? And so that's how that happened. I hadn't planned on racing in 2013. I was training for Ironman, but not the Ultraman. So I guess I had about 6 weeks to really ramp up the training. And I thought I did have a plan with that race. In 2010, the first time I did the race, I was really surprised and shocked that my run time was good for 5th place overall for the history of the race for women. And I thought to myself, wow. And I think that time to beat was like 8:15 or something like that. And I thought in 2013 that I could somehow run the course record. The joke's on me. I did not know what I was doing. And this is like not like me at all, the way I went out that day. I was pushing it right from the word go, and I never, ever do that. I mean, what a rookie mistake. What a non-rookie mistake. So I think I ran the half marathon, and then that's when things started to go dark. And like I don't know, I had goosebumps, and I was like walking all slumped. And you said, you need to take a break and elevate your legs. So I was lying on the ground with my legs on the fender of the car, and you had the space blanket on top of me. I saw these running shoes going by, and people are stopping and saying, what's going on? I'm like, I'm fine, just keep going. And then I started to feel better, and I got back up, and then slowly but surely it was the walk run, and it turned into a really strong run after that. And I was running up the hills. The back part of the course is very hilly, and I was running up those.
Yeah.
So it was just a blip.
Yeah, I remember you were doing well, and you were out in front of a lot of people, and then I think pretty much the entire field passed you while you were lying on the ground recuperating.
That's right.
But then again, you slowly started like passing all those people again, and like going up the hill. Yeah. Everybody tends to walk the hill, and you jogged up the hill, and people were looking at you, were like, what is she on? Because you were down and out on the side of the road, and now you're running up the hill. It was definitely one of those good experiences at Ultraman.
Yeah, that's weird.
And then also in that year, later in that year, you went on and did Ultraman Worlds.
Yes.
And that was not your best finish. I think that might have been your first DNF at a race, was it?
It was. It was.
Yeah, yeah. So how did you
Didn't make
feel
it
at
on
that?
day one. No, you remember.
So how did you feel at that time where you've been working up to doing these ultra races and you get to the world championship for Ultraman? It's the big event. You're back in Kona and you have a day one do not finish. You went over the time by 3 minutes or whatever it was
Yeah,
that you
something
missed
like
it by.
that. Yeah.
How are you feeling on that day?
During the day.
Yeah, during the day, and then after that.
Oh,
when you
that
just
was
missed
a
the cutoff.
tough day. Do you remember that storm and the pelting rain and wind, the headwind? Oh my God, it was awful. And it was, going uphill constantly up the volcano. There was no flat sections, and it just wouldn't stop. It was relentless, that rain. And then I could not believe I didn't finish. I couldn't finish in time. And I think I freaked out Grayson a little bit too. Because wasn't he all nervous and sitting on the edge of his seat?
Yeah, Grayson, our son, was there crewing with us. So yeah, he got a little bit excited about what was going on. It's his first time coming out to crew. That night, where it's dark at the finish line, it's raining. You come down the road and you've missed it by a couple minutes. What was that first? Did not finish. Feel like for you that day?
I was in shock. I was not expecting that at all. I was in good shape. It was just the conditions that killed me. I wasn't shocked. Then I was a little sad. And then I started to come out of it, especially when I found out there were other people. There were 4 other people, I think, that DNF'd. And I thought, okay, good. At least it's not me. And both Stacy Shand and I said that about each other. Like, oh, Lucy didn't make it. Okay, good. It's not just me. So we both had that feeling.
And then you did, like a lot of people do, you went on to the course for day 2, and day 3, I think, was probably a little more special for you. Even though you were just going out there as a participant at that point. Tell me about your day 3.
The day 3, that's a hard run. People underestimate that run. It's the sun bouncing off the dark pavement that's a killer. I actually found it more challenging than Badwater itself. So it was special in the way that my little boy ran, accumulated half a marathon of running with me, just out of the blue. So
how
he
old
would
was he
get
at
out.
that time?
Oh gosh, was he 15? No, he was younger than that. 13?
He probably would have been 14 at the time.
14. Yeah. So he just decided to come out and run with me every once in a while, and it all added up to about half a marathon.
Which he had already done at like age 9 too, by the way.
Yeah, he did. And he won his age group.
Yeah, what was that? The under 18 age group?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, well, you were just talking about how that was harder than Badwater. So let's get into that parallel track that you were running during this time. So you were doing triathlon and working at Ironman and Ultraman, but you were also trying to work your ultra marathons. And as I mentioned in the beginning, you were doing a number of ultra marathons, building your way up, trying to get to Badwater. And one of those races you did was the 135-mile race in Brazil. Can you tell us a little bit about that race and the experience you had there?
Sure. That's the sister race to Badwater. And that was, I did that to get in quicker to Badwater, to qualify for Badwater. You could have done the 135 and another 100 miler to qualify for Badwater, or you could do 3 100 milers. I thought, no, I just want to cut to the chase and just do the one that'll really get me in there. So I signed up for that.
And this ended up being one of those times where the ohana of the Ultraman family came in really handy in your career, because you were able to let people know that you were going there, and you were suddenly finding yourself being hosted by a man who did the race in Ultraman Canada, that is in 2008, right?
Paulo Khalil hosted me, and he's a doctor in Brazil. And I met and stayed with his lovely family. They were beautiful. He took me in. He was fabulous. He paid for everything and didn't let me pay for anything. He got my crew together, and one of my crew, Sergio Cardero, when we went to the breakfast, there were people coming up to him like he was a rock star. And I'm like, oh my God, I have him as my crew. So that was great.
And what is that course like? Tell us a little bit. I know it follows what's called the longest pilgrimage in Brazil, the Path of Faith.
Mm-hmm.
What was that course like?
Oh my God. I think it had about 10 kilometers of flat in it, and it was either up or down, and it was steep, not just, something you could jog up. This was like hardcore, steep little hills.
It's listed as having 30,000 feet of cumulative ascent and 28,000 feet of cumulative descent. So it sounds like straight up, straight down, but I'm guessing over a number of different mountains.
Yes. I've never heard, or I've never felt my quads like I did on that race. When people talk about quad busting, oh, my quads were killing me. I could not relate to anyone. This was the first time I felt it in my quads, and I thought, oh, I am human.
Yeah. And it's the other part that they always describe it as is they say it's analogous to climbing up and down Mount Everest.
Mm-hmm.
That's in the description as well. So for people that want a really hard ultra, would you put that as a really hard?
I would. And in fact, I think it's harder than, I know it's harder than Badwater. For me, it was anyways.
And to make it extra hard for you, there was an event that occurred shortly before leaving for Brazil as well, right?
3 weeks prior to Brazil, we were skiing at New Year's, I believe. And
it was New Year's Day.
Yeah. And my ski got twisted up in one of yours coming off the chairlift. And I just remember it kind of being wrenched in a strange way. And I tried to make the run down the hill, but my knee felt unstable and loose. And I believe we called it a day after that run. Yeah. And so I had a first degree sprain of the knee.
Mm-hmm. And Badwater was your big goal, the thing that you had read about in the 90s, and
Mm-hmm.
you wanted to get to that race. And you did get to do that in 2012. Was it 2012?
Yeah, 2012.
You got to do that in 2012. Badwater is often called the toughest race. But now you're saying that maybe Brazil was tougher. The actual vertical ascent and descent is only half of what you did in Brazil. So did it feel easier for you going over those 3 mountain ranges in Badwater?
It did, I swear. Well, I liked the pavement, so that was good. That was an epic run. That was my favorite run ever.
And I guess that's the other part that's different from Brazil, is that it wasn't on a road in Brazil, was it? Like, you lost the trail a few times because it's just
exactly.
like a
It's
little
like Jeep
donkey
road.
trail.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your Badwater race, because that's the big one in your career. So tell us how that race went for you.
Well, I kind of knew what to expect because I crewed the year before. And I remember getting out there thinking, it's not that hot out here. Everybody was like freaking out about the heat, but I really felt it wasn't that bad. So I kind of knew what I was up against coming into the race. I wasn't nervous about it because I'd experienced it before the heat. The training for it was pretty intense, but this worked for my first 100-miler, and it worked for Badwater as well, is doing the 50, 50, and 50.
What does that mean?
3 50Ks back to back. So
In your
I
training?
think in my training, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, 50K, 50K, 50K. That worked like a charm. Teaches you to run on tired legs. Cycling was a big part of, I would never go further than 50K because it just was too hard on your body. So I did a lot of cycling, 8-hour cycles.
Mm-hmm. Now, for the people that don't know, the way this race goes is it starts in Death Valley at the lowest point, the Badwater Basin in the United States. And then it finishes after going over 2 other mountain ranges at the trailhead to the Mount Whitney summit, which is the highest point in the lower 48 states. So you are getting a lot of elevation changes in there over that time in the race. Throughout the day, throughout the night, and you can see all the cars that are going with their runners along the mountain pass. It does get into a little bit of a nice quiet state and things like that too. Did you enjoy any of that kind of part of the race?
I loved it. When there were no cars around and I was just by myself out there and there was no sound whatsoever, I loved that. I was very peaceful and loved the sun. And so it was almost like a religious experience for me, if you will. It was just great. But remember when I ran into trouble?
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you about that because we had talked about you being down and out in the 2013 Ultraman, and this is 2012 Badwater. So I'd already seen that show, and I knew how it played out. But why don't you tell our listeners about the mistake you made in Badwater that caused you to go into shock?
And now, here's another Steve King story.
The person I'm going to refer to now is a professor of chemistry and physics who began her Ultraman career at Ultraman Canada in 2006. She placed 6th overall there, in fact, and was second female finisher. And that inaugural finishing time was 30 hours, 56 minutes, 21 seconds. However, prior to doing that event, she had raced Ironman distances beginning, I believe, in Wisconsin, 2002. She returned, did that event again in 2004. But she also, in 2003, completed Ironman Lake Placid, did 11 hours, 46 minutes there. Went to the Big Island, did Ironman Hawaii in 2003, and came to Canada 2005 to complete Ironman Canada. And that's what brought her to the Ultraman. She returned to Canada for Ultraman Canada again in 2007 and placed 5th overall then and won the women's title with a 29:34:55 clocking. She decided then to go to the Big Island. Unfortunately, she was unable to finish day 2, but she did complete day 1 there in 11:18:12, but came back in 2009 to the Big Island to take on the World Ultraman Championships and ended up placing 10th in the women's division with 32:41:19. Now, this lady also had an incredible crew made up mostly of her family, including her husband, Dave, who in 2007, he completed Ultraman Canada with a sub 30-hour clocking, 29:53:21. Her children, Eli and Abby, were part of the crew, as was her brother-in-law, John Barstis. So we do want to congratulate her and the crew for doing a wonderful job. This lady is also brilliant at her job because she's now got 2 patents. These are for counterfeit pharmaceuticals. She's got one called a PAD, which is a paper analytical device. However, there's something brilliant that happened just a while later because she took a 7-year sabbatical. And in those 7 years, she was very hard at work with a lot of stuff, but decided that there was something special she needed to celebrate. She went and completed the Titanium Man in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and came second place in the women's division there just after 6 weeks of training. But she decided to celebrate two things. One was turning 50, and one was being cancer-free for 10 years. She had been an ovarian cancer patient, and here she was with 10 years being clean of that and clear of that. And she came back to do an Ultraman, but this time she chose to do it in Florida. That was 2017. She finished 8th overall in that women's division with a time of 30:58:58, which was only 2 minutes and 37 seconds shy of her first Ultraman in 2006. So the person we want to celebrate today, Dr. Toni Barstis.
Thanks, Steve, for sharing that wonderful story about Toni. And just before we got into the Steve King story, I had asked Lucy this question. But why don't you tell our listeners about the mistake you made in Badwater that caused you to go into shock?
So I jumped into a pool and you had given me a popsicle. So I was eating a popsicle at the same time as being in the pool. And then all of a sudden I started to get really, really cold. And I got out of the water and I was shivering. And I wanted like a towel put on me because I was freezing, even though it was like 105 out there. And that's where I started feeling clammy and the world started going dark. And I believe you made me lie down with my legs elevated. And I thought, as I was lying there, I thought, oh my God, all that time, all that energy, all that training, all the money. I thought, oh, this is how it ends. Because I really couldn't foresee me coming out of that one. And then, but slowly but surely, I felt better and better and better. And I could not believe I was able to get back up and keep going after that. Started off running slowly or walking and then running slowly. And then I was fine the rest of the time.
Yeah. So basically what had happened was you had your super hot Death Valley body cooled way too rapidly in the pool with the popsicle, and your body went full on shock. Like it was, yeah. I think you ended up on that one. I think you were down for about an hour.
Yeah,
before
I was.
we could revive you with slowly giving you some fluids and Gatorade and things like that. And
yeah,
and I remember the other people who came along the crew with us on this event. It was Todd and
Jason from Las Vegas.
Todd and Jason who joined us, and they definitely both thought you were done. They're like, oh, this is over. This is over. But I had seen you recover from dark places in the 100-kilometer races, but this was definitely the worst that you'd ever been. And yeah, it was just slowly walking up the mountain out of that rest stop and eventually starting to jog a little bit. And yeah, you got right back into it again, which was great. And that's how I knew at Ultraman what to do to make sure you got back in the race.
Yeah.
And at that time, you ended up finishing Badwater, of course. And at that time, you were only the 9th Canadian woman to ever complete that race.
That's right. I think it was 9th place too. 9th place female.
You were having a big year that year. So you followed that up with the 2 Ironman triathlons on back-to-back weekends over at Mont Tremblant.
Why'd you let me do that?
Back at Ironman Canada.
What a stupid fool. Oh, couldn't you have reined me in a little bit?
Oh, if only I could.
My God, what was I thinking?
So tell us a little bit more about how this back-to-back Ironman weekends go for you.
The first one, Mont Tremblant, was awesome. I had a great experience. What a great little town. Everybody came together and it was really a festive environment. So, and I thought it was a very pretty course, albeit the bike was a bit hilly. So I came away from that and not bad physical shape. It took me a couple of days to recover. And we headed back up to Penticton to do Ironman Canada. And I didn't feel apprehensive. I didn't feel tired in my body. It was just, I was going to do this. And then the swim came on. And I just remember being so miserable during the swim. Like, why am I doing this? This is crazy. I don't want to do the full swim. I actually really thought about pulling a DNF because my heart wasn't into it. And I just dragged my body through the whole race and chastised myself. I love to push my boundaries, but that was too much. That really almost destroyed me. And will I ever do it again? Nope.
Until you try and do Ultraman back to back.
Yeah, something like that. God.
So we could say that you don't necessarily learn your lesson the first time.
I don't. I don't. Thanks for pointing that out.
Part of the reason, or maybe the main reason you've been so involved in training and racing over the years has been to battle against your depression. With a race on the horizon, you always had something to look forward to. The training was kind of therapy to you to help manage the highs and lows. However, after completing a race, it always led to that low, and that would force you into another bad cycle of trying to get out of it again with another race. So you kind of had your addiction to racing to control your depression, and I'm pretty sure that it actually worsened it rather than helping it. You were trying to live a balanced life, but you really weren't, because you were either training or racing, or you were working to pay off the race that you just did.
True.
Do you feel like today you have a better handle on this?
Well, kind of, but not really. I would still be doing crazy things if I didn't have two knees that didn't like me anymore. Not to the extent that I used to do crazy things, but I still like to pull crazy things out of the hat, just like this past summer.
Where you put a relay team together for Ultraman Canada
at the last minute, and I hadn't swam for 2 years, and I had 6 weeks to train for 10K swim,
and you got your best time.
And I got my best time. Moral of the story: don't train for the swim.
I don't know if that is the moral of the story.
As I said, it is.
So you use your training to help you with your depression. Is that still part of the therapy for you?
It is, but I'm limited with my knees now. But the whole reason why I started running is to control my depression. And I would run farther and farther each time, thinking I could outrun the depression, but always somehow it caught up to me. I controlled that for about 2 years, and then I just couldn't do it anymore. The depression was just all around me. And so I had to go on meds, and I've been on them ever since.
Yeah. And I think that's probably something that, we talked about this in the last episode as well, in a different, not depression, but in another mental health issue with Shane Mascarin. And I don't think it's totally uncommon for the type of people that are doing these events that there's going to be something, perhaps, as it is in the general population, within this population as well, where people are using this as a way to possibly medicate, as a way of putting it to help them out with their mental health issues.
Medicate is fair.
Now, you did something a little bit different recently. Well, not so recently anymore. But you became a kidney donor to a person that you did not even know. Can Can you tell us a little bit about that story? How did that come about?
Well, I always, for some reason, wanted to donate an organ. I felt that donating a kidney could really make a difference for someone. And I just had a feeling when I saw that newspaper article for the call out for a kidney that it was going to be me.
And that's how it happened for you. You just read this newspaper article where the person is like, I'm going to die if I don't get a kidney. And you just like called the number in the article.
That's right. It wasn't just that she was going to pass away. She wanted to care for her son who was passing away, and she wanted to care for him at home.
Well, that's obviously very, very touching part of the story, and I'm sure that you're happy that you were able to help her out with that. How has your sporting performance been affected by this, or has it been affected by having only the one kidney while trying to do these ultra events?
I find when I get my heart rate up that I don't feel great, as well as I can't tolerate the heat anymore. And that I'm part of a Facebook kidney donation group, and all us athletes are saying the same thing. We can't handle the heat anymore. But for myself, when I get my heart rate up there, it bothers me. So I can't push anymore.
So that was kind of a chosen effect to go take your kidney out, and that has affected your sporting life a little bit. But you also recently suffered a bicycle crash where you had another, I would say, near-death experience because you had a cracked skull and a brain bleed going on. Tell us a little bit about that.
It was a hot day in October, and I had two jerseys on, and I stopped at one point to take off one of the long sleeve jersey, and I stuffed it in my back bottle cage and just kept on riding. And I was having a great ride. I was just effortlessly, one of those great rides where you just go. And then I started to feel something, and I knew exactly what was happening, that something was sliding into my wheel. And I knew it was my jersey. And I remember slowing down, and I distinctly remember saying, "You got this." And that's the last thing I remember. I didn't have this. And then I woke up in the hospital, and I remember the doctor looked at me and said, "So you fractured your skull?" And I just thought, "Oh, I guess he's talking to me." I don't know. For some reason, I thought it was somebody else. Like, really? Did I really fracture my skull?
But this was actually quite a serious head injury for you. As I said, you had the skull fracture. You were having a brain bleed. The doctors were quite concerned about what was going on in there and the swelling. You were in the hospital for quite a while. Tell us a little bit about your recovery and what happened after that.
I remember I lost 2 days of my life. If somebody roused me, I would sort of perk up for a second. But for the most part, I was out of it for 2 days, completely out of it. And then I remember, I think it was a Tuesday that I started to slowly come out of it and realize just, how bad it was. My head felt like it split open, and it was the ice packs that saved me, not even the good drugs I was given. So I spent 8 days in this hospital, and I'm so glad it was like a quiet rural hospital because it wasn't a crazy place to be, and I got really good care. And then I spent another week at your place, and you looked after me. And during that time, I was on some hardcore drugs. I remember this one night, I was talking to the side of the couch at night, and I didn't know if it was a dream or not, but I did wake up from whatever it was, getting really annoyed that the couch wasn't talking back to me. I was asking the couch questions, And it wasn't answering me back. And that's what made me wake up, was I was really frustrated. Like, I'm talking to you, couch.
That's so rude of that couch.
I would suffer after that. I would suffer from really bad dizzy spells if I got up too quickly. I didn't really get headaches. It was just the dizzy spells that really got me. They made me feel nauseated. That took about 2 months to get out of my system. I also went to GF Strong. This is a hardcore place. This is where people have serious issues. And I was in that group participating, and I was looking around the room, and everybody's in wheelchairs or really incapacitated somehow. And I thought, this is a big deal being here. But I also felt that I was very, very lucky. It could have been a whole lot worse. And, these people have to rebuild. They have to learn to walk again, learn to talk again. And there was me, walking in under my own power and being cognitively okay and taking in the information. And that's kind of where it hit home on how serious this was for me.
And how much more serious it could have been.
That's right. Yes.
I remember that when you were in the hospital still, one of the biggest concerns you had once you could actually start talking again and you weren't just mumbling, was, can you get my bike back from the RCMP, please? Is my bike okay?
Wait, it gets better than that. I do remember going in and out of consciousness, and one of the first things I said in the back of the ambulance was, "Where's my bike?" And the ambulance guy, I'm pretty sure, said, "The RCMP have it." And that's not what I meant. I meant, how's my bike? As in, is it damaged? That's a true triathlete.
Yes,
Who cares about your mangled body? How's my bike?
Well, it's good that you can laugh about it now, but how has it affected your current ability to do racing?
It has not affected my current ability to race at all. The only thing permanent from that is I cannot smell. For some reason, my sense of smell got wiped away. I'm thankful that that's what I was left with, instead of, there could have been a whole other host of things wrong with me. So I'll take it.
So now in 2019, you decided you're going to try another one of your crazy doubles.
Yes.
And you signed up to do the Ultra 520 and Ultraman Canada on back-to-back weekends. You're going to do two 515s in, what is it? In 9 days.
An idiot.
How did that go for you?
I did not train properly for that. I did not respect the races nor the distances. I don't know what I was thinking. I can honestly say, though, it was just from lack of training that I didn't get through it. I'm pretty sure I would have, if I trained for a good solid year, I would have been able to. The run in the second race was amazing. I felt like my body knew what it was doing. I felt so good. Out of all those 6 days, that last sixth day, I felt like a rock star, and my body cooperated. That's why I think I could have done it with more training.
Yeah. You kind of turned into the female version of Nick Millette, of just rucking up to an Ultraman without training and trying to pull it out of your ass. Nick, of course, is one of the people who was one of the first people that we met at Ultraman, because when we went to your first Ultraman in Ultraman Canada, Nick was actually nice enough to take you out and to give you some tips and show you the swim and kind of allay some of your fears. So he was like one of the first guys we met in Ultraman and the Ultraman family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think he's still out there getting ready to show up at a race unprepared. I know Nick listens to this, so hello, Nick. All right. Well, you did your double attempt, and then this last summer you came back and did your swim. What's on the horizon for you? What's next in the sporting career of Lucy Ryan?
I will be doing Mount Kilimanjaro at the end of February, beginning of March.
Tell us why.
I'm part of a Facebook group, and it's called Kidney Donor Athletes, and we're all Ironmen. They put a call out for athletes who wanted to do this, and I applied, and I got in. And so we are doing some fundraising beforehand, and we're going on an 8-day trek up the mountain.
So are you going to actually train for this event then?
Oh, I'm actually quite nervous about it because it's all hiking, right? And where am I going to hike? It's all going to be snow up in the mountains in the Alpine. So I'm not sure how I'm going to go about doing the training for this one.
And what's the latest update on the bad knee situation that you carry?
Well, I plan to get a whole bunch of cortisone shots before heading off, and getting another knee brace, really expensive one. And I'm just hoping and I'm taking a bunch of pain meds. I'm just hoping I can get through it. And then after that, I'm assuming my knees will be nicely destroyed and they'll be very ready for replacements.
Well, maybe you need to speak with Makoto Hoshino, who did the 7 summits, and get some tips on how to climb a mountain.
Oh, I thought you were going to say something about how to replace your knees.
Makoto was my guest in episode 2 of the first season, and he told a great story about how he climbed the 7 summits around the world. So look him up. I'm sure he'd be willing to talk to you. Okay, well, Lucy, thank you very much for joining me today for this interview and catching up. It's not like I don't catch up with you regularly, but for the rest of the listeners who don't see you regularly, that know you, I'm sure they've enjoyed listening to your laughter as you tell these stories. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Oh, can we do it again?
What part?
Everything.
No.
Hey, if you liked what you heard today, please tell a friend and be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We'd appreciate it if you'd rate and review the show while you're there. Drop the names of the people you think we should interview and we'll get in touch with them and make that happen. Thank you for listening to 515, the Ultraman podcast, a production of 55 Enterprises. Now really, go subscribe now before you forget.